Deep in Ohio, in the lost city of Benchburg, lives the FMG tribe. This is their story of creation.
Long ago, before the concept of a concept was even a concept, there was the soup, a writhing mass of potential energy and unending creation, mindless.
And for centuries, that's all it was. Mindless. Until the soup had a thought. And from that thought, it expelled all its potential energy, making the soup solidify and lose all power of creation. But that power was not lost, but was put into the creation of FMG, a being whose first moments of existence made the notice of it being dark. So he sat alone, spinning in the abyss. He grabbed a small handful of the world he was on, dropping it, just to see what would happen. In doing so, he accidentally created two things: the sun and the ocean, yet still empty. Proud of his new creation, he felt he needed to make more space.
So, with his bare hands, he dug into the solid planet, inadvertently causing the mountains and caves, and making his world bigger.
Finally able to stretch his legs, FMG wondered what to do next. Scratching his head, trying to think, a single bronze hair fell from his head. And when it landed onto the planet, it grew into grass. Realizing this, FMG tore teeth from out of his mouth and turned it into corn. But it would not grow. For yes, there was sun, and yes, there was dark, but there were two extremes, hot and cold. So putting a handful of corn into his mouth, he spat them into the sky, and they popped, forming clouds. Then the same with the dark, punching holes into the abyss, forming the stars and the moon. Now standing on his livable world, he explored, seeing what he could make and create.
Using different lengths of his own hair, he sprouted every plant and tree on this earth. With the corn, he combined it, squeezed it, molded it into every fruit and edible vegetable, along with pieces of his own skin. Small made every peaceful animal on this planet.
But the FMG, seeing how there were two of every creature but only one of himself, felt a strange feeling. He grabbed his left pinky, and it naturally came off. When he put it into his hand, it had turned into a man. This was the first man, huge compared to all others. He decided that all men should be smaller to fully enjoy the world that he had created. And he created many, using more and more of his body, till he had lost his left arm. Finally, he could enjoy what he had created, watching his world grow peacefully. But the humans made constant demands for ores, metals, precious jewels, and the FMG obliged by using bits of his bones to make the precious objects, but put them deep underground so the men could not get them. This began to rift in between them, and the first man saw it. Wishing to help the great FMG, he tried to think of a way he could do that. The first man, seeing that the FMG used parts of himself to create things, thought that he could do the same. But if he was going to create something, it had to be just as great as the FMG himself. So he'd have to use the biggest part of him. Grabbing the sides of his neck, he thought, hoped, prayed even that he could create something, anything, pushing harder and harder, until this was the first death. Men saw this and were full of confusing feelings. Anger, rage. They blamed the FMG, screaming, saying that it was his fault. And they didn't understand what they meant. They were being drawn by feeling alone. And suddenly, without warning, FMG died. And without him, Earth lost its source of life. It became dark. And for days, it just got worse. Men saw decay, rot, because the first man did create something. Foul maggots and bugs, insects that ate away at his corpse. But the FMG had not rotted. And then men came to a conclusion. The great FMG had to have his head removed, or nothing would ever go back to normal. As it was slowly being sawed off, tears ran from the great FMG's face, giving life back to the world. Water. But from the blood of the FMG came everything terrible in this world. And the FMG's body disappeared, giving everything back. But suddenly men were outnumbered. They were no longer the only sentient creature on this earth, and they went into hiding. Their numbers dwindled.
And that is the story of our creation.